Have you ever considered that embracing solitude in old age might be the key to true freedom and happiness? As we grow older, the question arises, is it better to remain single, or should one seek companionship? This dilemma has shaped the lives of countless individuals, often dictated by societal norms and long-held beliefs. Today, we will challenge these ideas and uncover the liberating power of solitude. By the end of this discussion, you will gain a new perspective on love, independence, and fulfillment, potentially reshaping the way you envision your future. We live in a world that romanticizes relationships as the ultimate goal. Society conditions us to believe that being in a relationship equates to success, while being alone is perceived as a failure. However, this notion couldn't be further from the truth. The reality is that being single in later years can offer a sense of liberation that few ever experience. When you step away from societal expectations, you begin to see relationships for what they often become, a cycle of compromise and emotional dependency that may not always serve your best interests. Many people remain in relationships out of habit rather than genuine desire. They continue to play a role dictated by social conventions, fearing the stigma of being alone. But what if we told you that solitude could be a gateway to self-discovery and a more meaningful life? Being alone does not mean being lonely. Rather, it provides an opportunity to cultivate a deeper connection with oneself. It allows you to explore personal interests, passions, and a sense of purpose, unencumbered by external obligations. One of the greatest myths surrounding relationships is that they are necessary for happiness. However, countless individuals find themselves feeling even lonelier within partnerships that have lost their spark. They stay together not out of love, but out of a sense of obligation or fear of change. This illusion of companionship often leads to emotional stagnation, where individuals suppress their true desires to maintain the status quo. Romantic love, as society presents it, is often a constructed illusion, an idealized version that rarely withstands the test of time. Relationships frequently start with excitement and passion, but as time passes, routine takes over and the initial thrill fades away. What remains is often a form of coexistence that may not necessarily bring joy or fulfillment. Rather than lifting individuals up, these relationships can become a burden, limiting personal growth and self-expression. The pursuit of companionship has, in many ways, become an elaborate performance. From the moment people meet, they engage in a game of presentation, carefully curating their best selves to impress one another. This process often lacks authenticity, built more on social expectations than genuine connection. As a result, many relationships are founded on facades rather than deep, meaningful bonds. When the masks inevitably slip, reality sets in, and individuals are left questioning the very foundation of their relationships. The belief that love will solve all problems is another common misconception. While love can be a beautiful experience, it does not inherently fix personal issues or fill existential voids. True happiness and fulfillment come from within, not from another person. Relying on someone else for emotional security places undue pressure on relationships, often leading to disappointment and disillusionment. The moment you realize that your happiness does not depend on another person, you gain an unparalleled sense of freedom. Solitude offers a chance to embrace life on your own terms. It provides the space to reflect, grow, and engage in activities that bring genuine joy. Instead of seeking validation from external sources, you become your own source of strength and contentment. This independence fosters self-respect, confidence, and a deeper appreciation for life's simple pleasures. Many fear solitude because they equate it with isolation. However, being alone does not mean being disconnected. On the contrary, solitude allows for more meaningful interactions with others, free from the pressures and expectations of romantic relationships. It enables deeper friendships, stronger familial bonds, and a richer social life built on genuine connections rather than societal obligations. The societal narrative that promotes romantic love as the pinnacle of fulfillment often neglects the many advantages of a single life. When you free yourself from the constraints of a conventional relationship, you open doors to endless possibilities. You have the time, energy, and freedom to pursue personal ambitions, travel, learn new skills, and truly engage with the world around you. This sense of autonomy can be incredibly rewarding, providing a life of richness and meaning that is often overshadowed by the pursuit of romantic companionship. Many individuals who have embraced solitude later in life attest to the profound sense of peace and clarity it brings. They find themselves more attuned to their own needs and desires, no longer bound by the expectations of others. This self-awareness leads to a more fulfilling existence where happiness is not contingent upon another person's presence. The notion that being alone is a sign of failure is one of the most damaging myths perpetuated by society. In reality, choosing solitude can be one of the most empowering decisions one can make. It signifies self-sufficiency, confidence, and a deep understanding of one's own worth. Rather than seeking validation from others, you learn to appreciate your own company and find joy in your independence. If you have ever felt pressured to conform to societal expectations regarding relationships, it's time to rethink those notions. Life is not about fitting into a predefined mold, but about forging your own path. Embracing solitude allows you to live authentically, free from the constraints of outdated beliefs. It grants you the ability to prioritize your own well-being, make decisions based on your own desires, and cultivate a life that aligns with your true self. As you reflect on this perspective, consider what truly brings you happiness. Is it the presence of a partner, or is it the ability to live life on your own terms? If the latter resonates with you, know that you are not alone in your choice. More and more individuals are recognizing the value of solitude and the immense freedom it offers. If this message speaks to you, consider sharing it with others who may need to hear it. Like this video, subscribe for more insights, and remember, true happiness comes from within. Living a fulfilling life is not about adhering to societal norms, but about embracing the freedom to be authentically yourself. The choice is yours. Will you live by society's expectations, or will you embrace the liberation that solitude can bring? People often talk about the idea of finding their other half, as if happiness is something that can only be achieved through another person. But isn't that notion deeply flawed? It suggests that each of us arrives in this world incomplete, missing a fundamental piece of ourselves, and that only through someone else can we become whole. That idea is not just misleading, it's limiting. Why should we define our self-worth based on whether or not we have a romantic partner? I would rather be whole on my own than chase the illusion of completion through another person. Society relentlessly pushes the idea that being in a relationship is necessary, much like how it insists that we need insurance, a retirement plan, or a socially acceptable career. Those who remain single are often viewed with suspicion, pitied, or even judged as failures. But isn't it absurd that we allow social norms to dictate our personal happiness? The real issue isn't being alone. It's the fear that others will see solitude as a problem. Romantic relationships have stopped being a choice and have become an expectation, an obligation imposed upon us from the moment we become aware of love stories in books and movies. True love, however, isn't born from the fear of loneliness. It stems from being content within oneself, from a place of true freedom and self-acceptance. The unfortunate reality is that many people stay in unfulfilling relationships not because they want to, but because they are afraid of being alone. The irony? Many couples, despite sharing a home, a bed, or even years together, experience more loneliness within their relationships than they would if they were single. As the saying goes, if you feel lonely when you are alone, you are in bad company. This is the deception we live with. Many relationships exist not because two people deeply desire each other, but because they are afraid of the emptiness that might come without companionship. In these partnerships, dependence replaces genuine affection, and control takes the place of trust. If you find yourself constantly checking where your partner is, needing to know their every move, then what you have is not love. It's an emotional prison. And that's the harsh truth few are willing to face. Insecurity fuels most modern relationships, turning them into battlegrounds where the partners suspect each other, monitor each other's actions, and constantly fear betrayal. Infidelity has become the ever-present shadow lurking in the background of most relationships. But can we blame people for this paranoia? Society has created a system where temptation is everywhere, and trust is harder than ever to maintain. People live in a state of hypervigilance, checking their partner's phone, stalking their social media, and looking for clues that their worst fears are true. And if you're already at the point where you feel the need to check, the reality is that the relationship has already broken. It's just that no one wants to admit it yet. And here's the most unsettling truth. Even if your partner is completely faithful, the damage of doubt alone is enough to poison the relationship. The moment you start suspecting, you enter a loop of paranoia, especially if your partner is attractive or socially active. The issue isn't just whether someone will cheat, but the realization that infidelity feels inevitable in a world where secrecy is as easy as a single message or a swipe on a screen. Despite this, we still cling to the outdated notion of eternal fidelity, as if we live in a time when grand romantic gestures could guarantee a lifetime of devotion. If you are still watching this video, let me know by commenting 1 below. Your engagement matters, and I appreciate your time and thoughts. If cheating is so widespread, if nearly everyone has either been betrayed or betrayed someone at some point, why do we still pretend that lifelong monogamy is the only valid way to love? Why do we treat it as the ultimate ideal when reality has shown time and again that it rarely holds up? A love built on control is not love. A commitment forced by obligation is a cage. Why do we allow fear to dictate our relationships? Sex, one of life's greatest pleasures, has been turned into a measuring stick for morality rather than being seen for what it is, a natural expression of human connection and desire. In many relationships, it becomes less about passion and more about maintaining the illusion of loyalty. But what kind of life is that? What kind of love can be built on repression and fear? Nature itself teaches us a different lesson. Most animals do not chain themselves to a single partner for life, and even those that do still engage socially without guilt, without the burden of questioning their loyalty. They live freely, experience connection, and embrace pleasure without shame. Humans, however, have turned sex into a responsibility rather than a joy. We force ourselves into repetitive routines with one person, convincing ourselves that it's the price of commitment. But is it truly? Is that the freedom we were meant to have? Sexuality should be as natural as eating, something experienced without guilt, shame, or excessive restrictions. Outdated social norms should not dictate how we express desire. Those who engage in relationships without long-term expectations, as long as they do so with honesty and consent, are often seen as living more authentically than those trapped in restrictive partnerships. And yet, they are the ones most judged. Why? Because their freedom exposes the emotional chains that others refuse to acknowledge. For women, this double standard is even worse. A man who explores his desires is often admired, seen as confident or independent. A woman who does the same is often criticized, labeled as reckless or immoral. But the real immorality isn't in embracing one's desires. It's in the hypocrisy of those who claim to value purity while secretly fantasizing about breaking every rule they impose on others. So, why don't more people choose to live authentically? The answer is simple: societal pressure. Even those who preach loyalty and monogamy often fail to uphold their own standards. They speak of faithfulness, but wish for freedom. They advocate commitment, but dream of escape. The biggest illusion isn't that monogamy exists, it's that people genuinely want it. Let's be clear, this isn't an argument for recklessness. True freedom isn't about indulging in pleasure without thought or care. It's about making choices that align with your truth rather than living in fear of judgment. Sex should be something shared willingly, joyfully, without shame or obligation. We've been conditioned to believe that intimacy outside of a committed relationship is sinful. But isn't the real sin forcing ourselves into relationships that we don't truly desire? Isn't it more damaging to pretend, to repress, to live in a state of quiet dissatisfaction than to embrace what we actually want? Love should never be about control. Commitment should never be about fear. And relationships should never be about fulfilling societal expectations rather than personal happiness. Maybe it's time to rethink everything we've been taught about love, fidelity, and what it truly means to be whole. Many of the rules we follow in relationships exist not out of necessity, but because we've been conditioned to believe they are essential. The idea that fidelity must be an absolute requirement is one of the most confining constructs we've imposed upon ourselves. And yet, those who are the loudest proponents of monogamy often struggle the most with their own desires. They are trapped by the expectations they uphold, even as they suffocate within them. The reality is undeniable. When monogamy is forced, it breeds frustration, not love. Human attraction and longing are as natural as the need for air, and no amount of suppression will make them disappear. In fact, the more we try to deny our fundamental nature, the more we become consumed by it. This isn't about advocating for recklessness, but about recognizing that true commitment stems from choice, not obligation. A relationship should be a conscious decision built on shared aspirations, respect, and mutual understanding, not a desperate attempt to fill a void or to meet societal expectations. Love is delicate when it is based on dependency. When one person's happiness is entirely reliant on another, the relationship becomes a fragile structure, one that cannot bear the weight of true emotional growth. True partnership should not demand sacrifice at the cost of self-identity. Instead, it should be a space where both individuals thrive, not because they are bound by expectations, but because they choose each other freely every day. The problem isn't having a life partner, it's the belief that marriage or lifelong commitment is the only valid path. The pressure to conform to a predetermined mold of relationships leads many to discontent, yet they continue to follow it because they've been told it's the key to happiness. It's astonishing that people still believe following conventional norms guarantees emotional fulfillment. Ironically, many of these same people place blind faith in systems that have failed them repeatedly, yet they resist questioning the structures that dictate their personal lives. Real freedom begins when you stop playing the game designed to keep relationships in neat little boxes. And if this idea makes you uneasy, perhaps it's because some part of you recognizes the truth in it. People often equate fidelity with love, but in many cases, it is not love. It is fear. Fear of being alone, fear of boredom, fear that their partner will find something in someone else that they cannot provide. This fear disguises itself as devotion, but at its core, it is insecurity. We live in a culture where jealousy is mistaken for passion, and control is seen as a necessary safeguard in love. People monitor phones, read between the lines of silence, and second-guess motives, all in an attempt to secure their place in someone else's life. But when suspicion becomes the foundation of a relationship, passion fades, leaving behind only habit and obligation. Staying together simply because it is expected or because of shared responsibilities is not love. It is inertia. Love should never be viewed as a contract with rigid terms and conditions. Instead, it should be a bond of mutual respect, where both individuals recognize that autonomy is not a threat, but an essential part of life. True love does not come from restriction, but from trust and the acknowledgement that people evolve. When we embrace this, We no longer see change as chaos, but as a natural progression of human connection. Of course, this perspective challenges the traditional framework society has constructed. We have been conditioned to fear the loss of a partner so intensely that we suffocate them with control, mistaking it for care. But control does not ensure loyalty. It only breeds resentment. And resentment is the slow poison that erodes even the strongest bonds. The idea that constant reassurance is the key to a lasting relationship is flawed because no amount of validation can sustain a connection that lacks genuine understanding. When individuals suppress their true desires, whether emotional, intellectual, or physical, they inevitably create internal conflicts that manifest as dissatisfaction. What may have started as an open, honest partnership slowly morphs into a suffocating performance where authenticity is sacrificed for the illusion of stability. A relationship that demands someone to stay through restrictions rather than choice has already lost its essence. If you have to cage a bird to keep it, you haven't earned its love. You've merely trapped it. And no matter how much it may adapt, its heart will always long for the open sky. Similarly, if love is built on possessiveness rather than freedom, it is not love at all. It is captivity. Our society idolizes relationships to the point where singlehood is seen as a deficiency, a condition that must be remedied. But why? A person who walks alone is independent, unattached to expectations, and unafraid to define their own happiness. This autonomy threatens the structures that seek to control human relationships because it represents true liberation. Someone who does not need another to complete them is not easily manipulated, and that makes them a rarity in a world that thrives on dependency. Throughout our lives, we are taught that being single is a flaw, something that must be corrected as soon as possible. We are conditioned to believe that life without a romantic partner is incomplete, an unfinished chapter waiting for resolution. But, in truth, choosing to be alone is not a failure. It is a decision, one that requires strength and self-awareness. It is a choice that very few have the courage to make because it challenges everything we have been told about fulfillment. Ironically, those who criticize the single life are often the ones trapped in unhappy relationships, clinging to them not out of love, but out of fear. They carry these relationships like burdens, too afraid to set them down. The idea that coupledom is the default setting for life is a societal construct, one that stifles growth and perpetuates toxic dynamics. The natural state of a human being is freedom. This does not mean isolation, nor does it mean rejecting companionship. It simply means the right to exist as one chooses, free from imposed structures that demand conformity. If we observe the animal world, we see creatures that form bonds, but do not force permanence. Wolves hunt together, but rest alone. Lions form groups, but do not impose lifelong contracts. They understand, at an instinctive level, the balance between connection and independence. Only humans have turned love into an institution, a lifelong contract filled with clauses and conditions, stripping it of its true essence. Love at its core is not about possession. It is about choice. It is about meeting someone where they are and embracing them fully, not because they are bound to us, but because they choose to stay. Emma Goldman once remarked that the worst form of slavery is the one in which the enslaved loves their chains. And perhaps the deepest tragedy of modern relationships is that so many people have come to love their own captivity, mistaking it for devotion. Love and relationships often seem to provide a sense of security, yet deep down we understand that security is sometimes nothing more than an illusion, a well-constructed comfort zone. Many relationships function as a structured web of expectations, promising stability, but, in reality, leading to emotional turmoil. The irony is that singlehood is frequently perceived as a problem, especially for women who are urged to find a partner before they run out of time. When someone chooses to remain single, society often pities them, assuming they are missing out on an essential part of life. However, the The truth is quite the opposite. The person who remains single is not suffering. They observe from a distance, watching others remain trapped in relationships that have long since lost their warmth. They witness couples who exist in an endless cycle of resentment and obligation, clinging to relationships that no longer bring joy. It is often amusing how those same couples, bound by invisible chains, are the ones who question or criticize the single life. The societal push to be in a relationship is not rooted in love, but in fear. A single person is a challenge to the norm, forcing others to ask themselves difficult questions. If one individual can find fulfillment without a partner, it shakes the foundation of belief that companionship is a necessity. This can be a deeply unsettling concept in a society that idolizes romance. People are conditioned to believe that love is the ultimate achievement, that being alone equates to being incomplete. But in reality, being single is not the absence of love. It is a profound expression of self-respect and self-awareness. It is a deliberate choice that refuses to trade freedom for fleeting moments of attachment. It is the rejection of the performative aspects of romance, where individuals play roles, masking their true selves in a game of attraction and validation. Choosing to be single means stepping out of this performance, embracing a life free from the need to prove worthiness through a relationship. The single person is not in competition for affection, nor are they bound by societal expectations. They live on their own terms, finding fulfillment within themselves rather than seeking it from external sources. As Oscar Wilde once said, "To love oneself is the beginning of a lifelong romance." If a relationship does not contribute to personal growth, it ceases to be love. It becomes a burden. Love, in its true form, should complement life, not define it. Singleness allows relationships to exist without contracts, obligations, or a sense of ownership. When relationships are built on mutual respect and honesty, they do not threaten freedom, but enhance it. They become genuine connections, formed not out of necessity, but out of a sincere desire to share experiences. This is the true essence of love, an unforced, natural bond that does not require compromise of one's identity. When fully embraced, singleness is an act of profound honesty with oneself and with the world. It is an acknowledgement that love does not mean possession or control. It is the freedom to love without conditions, to experience life without attaching rigid expectations. A fulfilling life does not depend on being part of a couple. It is about living authentically, embracing every experience with an open heart and a strong sense of self-worth. Being single is not a phase to be rushed through or a temporary inconvenience. It is a legitimate, fulfilling destination in itself. It is a space where an individual can truly understand their own worth, free from societal pressures. Many people remain in relationships that should have never begun, using them as distractions from personal growth. But at its core, singlehood is not a deficiency. It is an opportunity. It is a chance to fully explore who you are, to develop your passions, and to experience happiness without imposed commitments or unrealistic expectations. Life is not about conforming to outdated ideals or living up to others' expectations. It is about owning your journey, shaping your own path, and defining happiness on your own terms. If this means walking alone for a time, then that journey should be filled with self-discovery, freedom, and a deep appreciation for one's own company. Take a moment to reflect on the choices you have made in life, the relationships you have built, and the beliefs you hold about love and self-worth. Understand that true happiness is not measured by relationship status, but by authenticity, self-respect, and alignment with one's personal truth. The key is not whether one is single or in a relationship. It is about being true to oneself, finding inner peace, and following a path that nurtures the soul. Thank you for spending this time with us today. We've explored some deep insights, and now I'd love to hear from you. What resonated with you? What is one lesson you'll take with you moving forward? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you found this video valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on messages of encouragement, wisdom, and self-discovery. Remember, true fulfillment comes not from external validation, but from the peace and clarity you cultivate within. And this is precisely